Welcome to the Creativity Lab, the podcast that shows how to channel your creativity to live your best, most beautiful life. And now here's your host, Director of the Creativity Lab at West Los Angeles College, Harvard PhD, TV writer, and professor, Dr. Katherine Boutry.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. Each episode, we discuss a creative approach to life's challenges. Today, it's all about creative leadership and creative management. Helio Vargas, a Trader Joe's produce section lead responsible for opening a new store, overcame impressive obstacles to succeed in his field. He'll talk about recognizing the strengths of those you manage and positioning them to be successful. Helio is a former West LA College student and just graduating from CSU Long Beach in Business Administration. Helio, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to talk to you today. And I remember you as a student really well. You were in my English 103 class. And I remember what an amazing student you were. And yet I remember looking at, and this is not in a bad way, but you looked so exhausted. And you were paying attention. It wasn't like you were disengaged. You were incredibly attentive, but you were fighting so much to stay awake. And then I remember when I started to learn more about your life, why that was. So I know that things haven't even changed that much for you. Can you just walk us through your regular schedule?
I usually wake up at 2:45 in the morning. I get ready for work, try to be there by 3:30. Then I'm usually there from 3:30 in the morning to 11:30. I work at Trader Joe's, which I probably should have said earlier. Usually what I do is unload the trucks for the first about hour and a half. So we're outside in the marina in the cold, which is always fun because we're right next to the water, so it gets really cold and also gets really hot. Then after that, I go inside. I run a department. I run the produce department at my store, which is the biggest department. I usually do that from, I would say, maybe from 5 till 11:30. Then I go home. Depending on what day it is, I go take a nap, or if I don't have class, or if I have a class or my internship, I go to school. I usually do about, depending on the week, I do 3 to 4 hours on my internship, which is prepare taxes for people who are low income. So it's through the IRS. Because
your major is?
Accounting.
Accounting. Okay. And where are you at school?
Cal State Long Beach. And then from there, I usually have that until 2, and then I have class from 2 to 10.
When do you sleep?
Just whenever I can fit it in. If when I get home from school, lately I've just been really tired, so I'll just go straight to sleep, do 4 or 5 hours. If I'm really tired, I'll sleep on my lunch.
What gives you the desire and the motivation to do that? Because I don't think everybody could do that.
It's actually a professor from West LA, Dr. Arjuno, and he's a stats teacher. And I had his class, and then he talked about once how if you're come from low income or you're just disadvantaged in some way, you have to sacrifice something, whether it's going out. And you mentioned, he's sleep is what you're probably going to have to sacrifice, but you have to sacrifice something to catch up because you're behind. You're not going to be able to do the same as everyone else and be at the same level. You just have to give something up. And that's what luckily I can function without sleep pretty well. I mean, there are the days where I have to go home and sleep for 10 hours, but catch up day. But for the most part, I can function pretty well without sleep.
What is it that you felt was your obstacle, if you framed it that way for us?
Well, I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in Nicaragua. My parents brought me here when I was young. And I think it's just a lack of knowledge, really, that's a big disadvantage. I had no one who's done it before to teach me, so I had to do it through trial and error. And just learning, even when you grow up, you think, how are you going to pay for school? Is school really for me? Do I have to start working? I didn't start school right away. I didn't start going to school when I met you. I was 27. And that's because I didn't think it was something for me. And so that was my biggest disadvantage. And then I learned, how to pay for it, so it doesn't all come out of pocket. There's no one there to pay for me. I'm doing it all on my own, so I have to work and go to school at the same time. Because I waited so long, maybe it would have been much easier when I was younger, but school wasn't something that I thought I could do.
I'm surprised to know that you were 27. Not that that's old, that's not. We have students of all ages, but you were absolutely present and engaged and super smart. So I'm surprised to hear you say, and you're not the only student who says this, that they don't feel prepared or they feel in some way that they're not that they're less than the other students, which is absolutely not the case. But you made that decision, which is pretty amazing, to come in and to not sleep and to sit there and then to go on further. What made you decide to transfer?
The goal was always from the beginning was to transfer. What made me make that decision was I had a discussion with one of my bosses at work, and it was time for me to decide like if this was going to working at Trader Joe's was going to be my permanent career, or because if I would have got promoted, I wouldn't have any time to go to school, or if I wanted to go to school. And at the time, the way the economy was, where the company was, it was becoming increasingly hard to become like a captain or regional without a degree. So I decided, I was like, you know what, let me go back to school and finish school. And then since then, so many things have changed. Like the company was like in a position where it was like very difficult to get promoted, where right now they're struggling to find people to fill the positions. And it's like the strength, like the worker has the strength, not the company. Like they're pretty much promoting anyone at this point. Like they just need people. And back in that time, it was very difficult you had to jump through all kinds of hoops to get promoted. So yeah, that's what was a catalyst for me deciding to go back to school and pursuing a business degree.
So you graduated high school in the U.S.?
Yes.
And then you decided to go to school, but you knew you had to work. And Trader Joe's is a pretty innovative company. They're cited for having innovative business practices. What made you choose Trader Joe's? Was it accidental? Was it purposeful on your part?
Trader Joe's is a company that really likes to hire like through recommendation or family. And I had a friend that I went to high school with. We played football together, and he worked there. I didn't start there until I was 21. I just did 10 years. I was 23. So I just got to my 10-year anniversary in August. But he's the one who got me in. And then they paid well. Like, we were at that time, I don't even remember what the starting wages were, like what the minimum wage was, but starting wages were $11.50, which is like $3 or $4 more than anyone else was paying. So that's what I started at, and then that's what made me go there. And then we have full benefits. They pay for part of my school now. We have retirements. They like pay time off. So it's a really good company to work for. Even this time during COVID, like if you got sick, they were paying you while you were sick. So it's a good place to work.
One of the things I was most impressed about you when you were such an instrumental part of the Creativity Conference on campus is how much creative leadership you demonstrated in problem solving and responsibility. Do you get to use any creative leadership at Trader Joe's? What is your title at Trader Joe's?
Crew member, but I'm in charge of the produce department.
I see.
Yeah, so it was definitely something that Trader Joe's has helped me with, is how to build my leadership style. Like I'm someone who's very like, if I'm in charge, like I want things to be perfect. I'm very detail focused, and not everyone is like that. So learning to deal with different employee like styles and just like what motivates them was a huge learning curve for me. When I first started my original store, it was a very veteran store. It was the second Trader Joe's ever. So there was a lot of employees that have been there 20, 25 years.
Second one ever.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was, and I was new. I quickly I realized I wanted to like take on more responsibility. So I did, and it was just like managing those, because like it's a difficult situation to be in when you've been in the company for a year, 2 years, and you're telling someone who's been there for 25 years, like this is not the way I want it. Like I want you to do it this, and they're very resistant to change. And I eventually was able to like where everyone like grow in that store and like be the leader of this, like this. I would say I would be like one of the main leaders of the store. Like where anything that I said, they would take into consideration. We'd make those changes, and it was like, and just managing those personalities. Like not everyone is motivated. Everyone has their own things going on in their own life. Maybe that day they don't have it, and being understanding of that, because I wasn't at first. Like I didn't understand like why someone would come in and like just not put maximum effort in. And I was there for about 7 years until the new store in the marina opened, and I decided to transition. And I went from being one of the newest employees, even though I had been there for 7 years, I was still one of the newer employees, to being the veteran of the store. Like at my store, everyone was new. There was maybe like 4 or 5 other people that had been there for a while, but everyone was new. So it required a lot of teaching, being even more patient, because everyone didn't know what to do, and like who's going to be receptive, like putting people in the right place to be successful, and just being very observant. Like, okay, this person excels here, so this is what I should have them do, or this person struggled with this. Are they willing to learn? Like if I go over there and teach them like, hey, this is a proper way to do this, or this is the most efficient way to do this, are they willing to learn? Because there's such some people just don't care. I mean, just managing all those personalities, that's where I've learned the most, and like not thinking that everyone thought the same way as I did or was going through the same things, because everyone's just dealing with different things in their lives.
So not only were you on the newer side, but that store itself was new. Mm-hmm. Did the newness of the location, it was a brand new store, correct?
It was a brand new store, and our estimates when we opened were like we were going to be about the same amount of sales that my old store was doing, which was like middle of the pack, where we quickly learned that's not going to be the case. We thought middle of the pack to number one. Like we were the busiest store
under
in the
your
region,
leadership.
and like so it was adjusting to like we need to grow quickly because we didn't have enough employees at first, because we didn't expect to be that busy. So we're continuously bringing in new employees. We have to get them up to speed, and then just everyone isn't as efficient because everyone's new. So like what would require someone, maybe one person to do at my old store, is requiring 2 or 3. And so it was just that whole adjustment to like being patient, that like it's just gonna take a while for us to get there. And I would say now 3 years in, we're still number one store in the region. And everyone, like, people have gone and we've gotten new employees, but like the core group is there, that now the store is very smooth. We've gone through a pandemic. That was it was very interesting. Like from one day to the next, our sales tripled. Like every day the store was empty. Like we would bring in maximum amount of product that we could bring in, and everyone was buying everything. So every day we'd have to restock the entire store, and so that was it. And like sometimes the trucks would show up late because the warehouse is falling behind. So like we had to be creative. Like half the store isn't stocked. Like we have to block off half the store so we can stock comfortably quickly, and then allow people to like come and buy the product. But like you'd sometimes have crowds like form around the meat section, because we're trying to fill meat, and like everyone wants to buy meat, and it's like everyone's watching you. It was a very interesting time. And then quickly we learned from our mistakes of letting everyone into the store, and we formed line. So now there was line. It was much more organized. So as the weeks went, we got more organized. We learned what worked. We learned from other stores like what was working for them, and eventually it was very smooth, and we were lucky. Our store was very consistent. We didn't have a huge dip in sales. So everyone was able. It was like we were comfortable. Like I would say our store was one of the lucky stores, because there was other stores that got severely affected by the pandemic, and like where their sales dropped in half. And like now you're having to deal with like cutting employees' hours. You're having to deal with like all of a sudden your entire like ordering patterns changed because like you're not selling as much. People left, like people who were, depending on the area, like some people just moved out of California completely. So it was a huge transition, but we were lucky. We never got our hours cut. We actually, our sales kept growing. It was just much more steady.
That's very inspiring, actually. And I'm so proud. That's like creative problem solving in action. That's fantastic. How were you able to motivate some of those employees who just didn't care? How did you find it within yourself? Because you didn't have management experience before that, right? Before Trader Joe's. So how did you find the tools and techniques in order to motivate so many different kinds of personality types?
Trial and error, I would say the most, and I observed how other managers did it, like the ones that were successful. Like one thing about Trader Joe's is managers are moved around constantly. Like the most a manager will stay at a store is like 2 years. Once you get to the higher levels, like they constantly moving you, so you're learning from each other. But every time I saw new ones come in, like they were successful and why were the ones that weren't not successful. And I learned from their mistakes. And one thing that I had a manager, her name was Sarah, and she was very, very good at motivating. Even the employees that on other days wouldn't work hard, for her they would work hard. Is because she got to know them, she built a relationship with them, so they felt invested in the store. So that helped motivate them to be better. And then during the pandemic, there's one thing I was very proud of everyone in our store, that everyone came together, because it was utter chaos, and like everyone came together, everyone was working hard. You weren't seeing anyone like that would normally not care that everyone was invested.
Were you ever afraid? Did you ever have a day when you went in just afraid of what you were going to have to deal with, and did you have to fake it?
When things go wrong, I like being there because it's just different. Like you're so used to doing the same thing every day that things come kind of routine. So when things started going crazy, like out of whack, and things were unexpected, like I like those situations because it's just fun. It's different. It's like you're getting to face a new challenge, and like now I know, okay, next time I would do this better, or I would do this differently. Like you're not going to be perfect. It was recently training someone on how to be a better manager. She recently got promoted, and I was like, the most important thing is to make a decision. It's not always going to be the right one, but it's better than not being decisive. Because then now now everyone can see like, oh, you don't have a plan, and like everyone, like that panic spreads through everyone. Like make a decision. Like whether later you can look back and be like, oh, that was a wrong decision, but in the moment you have to be confident, and then whatever decision you make, and then go from there.
Are you able to use your creativity in your job?
Yes, I would say like the way I deal with most things is like being creative and how to find the solution. Like the reason why I was able to get where I am in the company or even in school is like every time something would be assigned or they would ask for a volunteer, I'd always volunteer. So I could learn how to do it so I'd be more valuable. Like I remember there was a point where my store was getting remodeled. I volunteered to work all nights. So I was working from 10 at night till 8 in the morning. And then I would go on my day. And so I could learn how to build things, how remodels worked. So when I went to open the new store in the marina, I knew how to do everything. So I was more valuable. Just like seeking out knowledge, like being informed so that you don't make the same mistakes as others, or you learn from others' mistakes. How
did you keep yourself going when you were feeling like, I'm exhausted, I just want to, this is hard?
I wouldn't say that, I always was successful. Like there was times where maybe I was too tired and I shouldn't have got the grade on a paper that I should have, or I didn't do as well on an exam. But all those obstacles came, you have to just keep going. Like, what are you gonna do? Stop, and then you're just gonna be left without a degree. Like, it's better to like struggle, get your degree, than not ever have had one. That's the way I look at it. It's
great to say you just have to keep on going, but how do you find that in yourself?
The way I stay motivated is I like to take on responsibility, because I feel like once I'm in charge, once there's people depending on me, I feel like I have to be successful because I'm letting other people down. When I don't have that responsibility, you're like, oh, it's easy to be like, well, whatever, I won't do it, or like, who cares if it doesn't get done? It only falls on me. But when it's other people that you have to depend on you, like it's like extra motivation to make sure you do a good job.
If I thought of the one word that came up to mind when I thought about you, it was responsible and responsibility, because you were so helpful with the creativity conference and I knew I could always depend on you. That's a pretty amazing characteristic. So I'm happy that you see it in yourself, because it's important to see it in yourself. Don't you think? That must give you some source of pride to recognize, what you've done, what you've managed.
Yeah, like I'm almost there. It's my last semester. I'm looking forward to graduating and moving on to whatever I decide to do. But yeah, it's like I look back and I always think about it, like how difficult it's been, like, and like, and it's a point of pride, and I hope my parents are proud of me. My parents are back in Nicaragua, so they won't be able to be there for my graduation, but I hope they're proud.
I'm sure they are. How could they not be? When you graduate, which is, I'm sure you're doing, as well as you did at West, incredibly well. What's your next step? What does your ideal life look like for you, or the next 5 years? Sometimes it's hard to think of the biggest picture, but what do the next 5 years look like for you?
I'm like in between deciding whether I want to do taxes as my career, or if I want to transition into retail management. It's called managerial accounting. So my first goal is to get my CPA, to start studying for it. You have to pass 4 exams. You have a year to do it. If you don't pass it in a year, you have to start over. And then you have to put in hours under a CPA, and you also have to have 150 units. So I will either have to decide to get a master's or go to a community college again to get the 20 units I'm going to be missing when I graduate.
Do you see yourself in your own firm, working for a bigger firm?
So the roadmap I have in my head right now is to go to a big 4 firm, because it's very prestigious. Put in the time there so that I could transition to managerial accounting. Because most places, like if you say you want to be an accountant for like a CFO for Trader Joe's, they usually recruit from big 4 firms. So you have to put the legwork in there, be there, make it to manager, which takes like 3 or 4 years. So that I have that on my resume and have the CPA on my resume so that I can transition out.
How do you get to be creative as an accountant? I feel like we all want our accountants to be pretty creative, don't we, at some points?
I would say the most important skill is research. Like, people think of math, I think of like finding the solution to the problems, because you're not ever gonna, especially right now I'm doing taxes for people, every person is different, there are different circumstances, you're not gonna know the answer to everything. So it's sitting there and like doing the research, like, okay, how do I solve this issue for this client? That's the most important thing, I think, is just be able to find research, find the answers so that you can help the person.
So if you had to have some words of wisdom to leave other students who were maybe struggling, students who were feeling like, oh, this is hard, I'm working and I'm not sleeping and I'm doing all this stuff, what would you say to them?
Don't ever think you're not good enough, because I used to think that. And then as I started comparing myself with other people at work or at school, I realized I can do this also. But there was a lot of self-doubt at first, like that people were just better prepared, or I just wasn't equipped to do the things that I needed to do. And it's not. I would say it's more important to have good study habits than to be smart. Because if you can work at it and you can put in the time, you can make up for it versus just being talented. And because that's something that I struggled with early in my school career. I've always have a very good memory, so I would never study for exams. I could listen to your lecture and remember everything you said and not put in the time. But as things got more difficult, I couldn't get by on that anymore, and I had to learn to put in the work habits of going home, doing my homework, studying, taking notes, which is something I've always struggled with because it's hard for me to write and listen at the same time. I'm more focused on writing the notes, but just being creative and being willing to put in the work, I think, is more important.
And what's your best creativity trait, do you think? And what would you like to be better at?
I would say my biggest struggle still is taking notes. Even now, sometimes I have to record the lecture, or luckily then some classes are online. You can rewatch the lecture, then I'll take the notes a second time, because I feel like I don't fully comprehend everything if I'm so focused on taking the notes versus just listening to the lecture. I think that's the thing I struggle with most at school. And even time management, I have so many things going on, and sometimes it is difficult, oh man, I'd rather just take a nap. Then I'm no, I have to finish this assignment now so that later I'm not overwhelmed. And just mapping out my week has become very important. I have alarms set for everything. I do it at the beginning of the week. I'm okay, I have this to do. So it needs to be done by this time. I set little goals that I want this to be done by this day, so I don't get overwhelmed at the end of the week.
I have to say that you inspire me incredibly. I feel like your diligence and your perseverance in doing what you do. How you could sit there and say you don't have time management. You're doing more than any human being I've ever met, literally, and doing everything so well, and being given responsibility and rising to the top each time. It's incredibly impressive. Thank you so much for being here today. I found this was such an interesting interview. Thank you.